Welcome to Impact the World, the show for and about creatives, changemakers, and entrepreneurs. This is a conversation episode where a special guest shares with me what they are creating and the behind-the-scenes journey of their experience. Welcome to Impact the World, where my guest this week is Kim Schaper. You may have seen Rebecca Schaper, Kim's mother, interviewed a few episodes ago. In that episode, we discussed A Sister's Call, which is the documentary that Rebecca made, which involved her whole family. So if you check that episode out or the documentary, you will know Kim because she featured in that documentary quite prominently. The reason I wanted to have Kim on the show is she has taken her own past with eating disorders and mental health struggles and turned it into her life's work so far. So Kim and I talk about eating disorders, body image, and her work helping others transform not only their outer appearance, but their inner feelings and the body balance and inner chemistry that is so often missing as a piece in the way that we treat our bodies. So enjoy this episode. And as usual, you can find links to Kim's work in the show notes where we provide links. Kim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's such an honor to be on your platform. And it means a lot to me that you have me on here. So your audience is very grateful to have you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, we met last year at our Soul Magic retreat in Costa Rica. And what was really cool about meeting you there was we were doing circuit training in the morning, me and a couple of team members, before we would go and run the retreat in the day. And about 4 or 5 days in, I think, you said, hey, if you want me to train you and your team, I'd be happy to do that one morning because fitness and training people is your thing. Mm-hmm. You kicked our butts. We all were thinking we were tired before we met you. And then literally it was fantastic though. And it was so great to experience your teaching. And from there, I really hooked into what you were doing on Instagram and what I see in the work that you do. And I know you do various things, but I think you open up such an important conversation about our self-image, our body image, and our mental health and how they all intersect. Mm-hmm. So I've recently interviewed your mom, yes. Rebecca Schaper. So those of you who've seen or heard that podcast, you might know a bit of Kim's story from the documentary A Sister's Call. But what set you on the road to doing this work the way that you're doing it now?
Such a great question. Thank you for asking. First off, you nailed it at the retreat. You did so well. I remember you walking around and saying, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to sit on the toilet. My legs are so sore, but I love that. And so I apologize. You said you asked what got me into this. I was so preoccupied by how sore your legs were. So, I think for me, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. As I was saying earlier, I don't like people telling me what to do, and I like to be my own boss, and I like to kind of set my own schedule. So that was a part of it. And also, I think for me, I've been in the fitness space since 2005. And over that course of time, I was working at various gyms. And one thing that really stood out for me, especially I would say around 2013, 2014, while I loved what I was doing and I absolutely loved my clients, there was this burning desire to do more. And that while I loved it, and I was counting reps and doing these things and giving my clients exercises, in the back of my mind, I was creating and I was thinking, okay, what else can I do? How can I create blogs? How can I get this message out? And I found myself disconnecting from my clients. And I also found a little bit of resentment that I was becoming resentful of being in the confines of this small gym that in my gut, I knew I was supposed to be really helping people on a much larger scale than just within the gym.
That was what you were built for. Yeah, which was very evident when I first met you. And I think one of the most striking Instagram posts of yours that I ever saw, and I had a real personal resonance with, you shared a photo of yourself when you were heavier, and you shared a photo of yourself as you look now. And you talked about in that post You said struggling with depression then, still sometimes struggle with depression now. And you don't see many people talking about that, but it's so important how a physical transformation is not always an inner transformation, yet we're often sold this idea if we figure out our body or our health, everything else changes, which I have personal experience isn't the truth.
It's not. No, it's so true. And I think there's just such a misconception out there. I think people see others, maybe whether it be on social media or just in everyday life, and they think, wow, they've got it all together. They have all the things. And then they don't really know what's going on within that person. That person really might be struggling, or they might be, just having a really hard time. And I think it's easy for people to create that comparison trap and think, oh gosh, only if I was doing what this person was doing, or only if I was at what this person's doing, then my life would be happy. And it just doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. And what I've also learned, the more I've grown and my business has grown, the more I've had to lean into discomfort and figure out, okay, what are some trigger things going on for me? What are some things that I need to work on within myself because I see it coming up in my business?
That's so true. The entrepreneurial path as the ultimate path of self-growth, I think,
People don't realize, they think, wow, oh my gosh, it's so easy, it must be so fun. Like, you have no idea.
Totally. I remember many years ago working with a client who I was mentoring, and she had this idea. She said, I'm going to become a best-selling author and then everything's going to be great. And I was like, no, because it might be great on one level, but you're going to have to figure out money, you're going to have to figure out running a team, and these things are stressors until you learn to figure them out. So
it's so true. And there's something Tony Robbins said I'll never forget. He said, I've worked with Academy Award winners, billionaires, and they come into my office and the first thing they say is, I'm not happy. Like, I thought I would be happy when I made this money, or when I had this best-selling book, or when I won this Academy Award. And I quickly realized it didn't make me any happier. And so he said something that's always kind of resonated with me. He said, anytime someone grows, let's say you're going up a mountain, and you go halfway up this mountain, you might hit this milestone. A lot of times people are so fixated on trying to find this end goal and get to the top that they miss out on all these little milestones. So it's about hitting those milestones, looking around, seeing what's around, enjoying the moment, and being really in tune with that moment, and then saying, okay, I'm ready to go again. Because it's easy to forget where we started, especially if we're really hard on ourselves or we're driven. And a lot of times what we think is the end goal never really is. There's different paths and different ways you approach it.
So true. The experience that you're feeling rather than what you're building on the outside, because I think society is changing now, but certainly when I was growing up, we were all fixated on outer realities. That was kind of where we were taught to place our focus. Get married, have kids, have a successful career. Plenty of money will take away all your problems. And of course, the shock horror that you have when X, Y, and Z doesn't fill the inner hole. So I'm curious for you, I know you've had quite a journey with fitness, your body. Can you just take us through a few of like your big experiences around the body and around using the body to soothe or destroy?
Gosh, such a great question. So if you want, I'll give you a quick little background. Perfect. So that way everyone can kind of understand. Quick story, I was always pretty active growing up in middle school and high school. I never really had any issues with food. I enjoyed food. I didn't really view my body good nor bad. It was just indifferent. I enjoyed being active and I enjoyed just having fun. It wasn't until I went away to college, I gained the traditional freshman 15. And I came home and my mom was very kind. She's like, hey, you know what if we just got a trainer together? And I had never lifted weights in my entire life. I just ran cross country and that was it. I would pick up these little measly weights here and there, but that was the extent of it. So I said, okay, let's do it. So we hired this trainer, and I think this is a big reason why I went into the field. I don't know if my mom truly knows this, but I got into it, met the trainer. My mom and I trained with this guy for the summer. And I got in great shape. He put us on a very specific diet. It was essentially really 5 foods that we could have. And I never really understood the term or the behavior of binging until I experienced this type of dieting. So what I mean by that is, since we are on such a restrictive food intake and we are only allowed certain foods, sure, my body responded really well. One, because I was 19, and two, because I had never dieted before. So I loved how I looked. I thought, wow, okay, I'm getting really lean and really fit and strong. And I would go back to the gym, and I found myself having a lot of self-image issues, thinking, okay, I have to maintain this. Like, how am I going to do this? And so the trainer and other people would just give these affirmations of, wow, you look amazing. What are you doing? And so I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to maintain this certain image. And I found that with the binging piece, which I had never experienced before, I would as people say, they eat clean Monday through Friday, and then come the weekend, they just binge and they go hog wild. And a lot of that is that all or nothing type mindset when it comes to food. And I realized on the weekends I would binge on like pizza and cakes and sugar. And I'd never experienced that before. And then I'd come back to the gym and the trainer would say, you've gained weight. You know, you look heavier, you look swollen. And so then that started to feed my insecurities. And I thought, okay, well, I've got to lean out again, or I can't eat this stuff. So it became this vicious cycle. And I went away to college, and that diet essentially became my Bible. I had it in my right pocket, and my dieting and my food behaviors went hand in hand with abusive relationships. So if I was dating a man who's very abusive, mentally, physically, emotionally, the food went hand in hand with that. So my way of numbing and not communicating was through restriction or compulsive exercise. So I would go for hours on end to run if my feelings were hurt by my partner, rather than having that difficult conversation. So my parents came, they saw me at school, and I got down to about 75 pounds, and I'm 5'4" right now. I'm probably maybe about 135. I tend to hold muscle. So 75 pounds is really low for me.
Yeah.
They pulled me out of school. I was in and out of treatment centers 7 times over the course of my 20s. So I never really got to experience my 20s, really. A lot of my friends were getting married. They were starting to have children. And here I was, just getting out of another treatment center, trying just to survive. So the first few treatment centers, it was fine. But with insurance, especially in the States, they view you kind of as a number. So once you reach your weight, then you're pulled out of treatment, especially if it's covered by insurance. And then you have to kind of figure it out on your own. So you really don't have any coping skills to use. So while I would get out and my weight normalized, I still felt like the same, like nothing really shifted. And so I would go back to my restrictive behaviors. And one thing that I think is really important for people to know is anytime there's like this disordered eating pattern where people are restricting, or they're really using food as a means to numb out. One of the scariest things for me was, after these restriction periods, I would be so hungry, like physically and emotionally. And my way of developing my sense of self-esteem and confidence was by how I looked. And so when I would start to regain the weight, because physiologically I was hungry, it was also a really hard time for me. And I think it is for a lot of women when they emotionally start feeding themselves again. It's like your brain wants to numb out because you're hungry. Yet when you start regulating your food intake again, your brain starts to regulate, and then all the stuff that you suppress is coming up and you don't know how to manage it. And so if you don't have the tools, then you're going to go right back to your old behaviors. So, I think I was in and out of treatment centers for a while, and I finally was like, okay, something has to give. I was binging and purging, and I was really depressed, and I was just going like suicidal and stuff. And thank God for my family. I would not be here today if it wasn't for them. They are incredible throughout the entire experience. So I think for me, after going through all of that and really just kind of coming out the other end, it was really important for me to share and really help other people tap into their sense of purpose in this world. I hate even saying that, but just, I guess, knowing that they're loved unconditionally, and that it's not really about the food and it's not about the weight. It's so much deeper than that. And I think sometimes it's hard for a lot of us to see that because we're a society for quick fixes.
It's true. Yeah. I also love it because, when I first met you, and I hadn't met you before last year, it was very easy to admire you physically when I first met you. And we do that to each other. And it was, because we're all there in Costa Rica, not wearing much. And so, to see your muscle definition and you were clearly an athlete, I was like, wow, cool, and she's got it all together. So I think that's ultra powerful that you're on social media with your image, but talking about your journey, your history, your now. Because I think all too often we see a lot of, the kind of imagery. It's like, hey, yeah, here I am on a yacht in a bikini with abs, you know, and then everybody who doesn't have, bikini and abs is like, oh, Sure. It's really important. I think that was the power for me of you sharing the internal journey is different to the external journey. And it's so important because we're all going to age. Yes. And I think at the moment we still completely devalue age in our society. It's all kind of stacked towards appreciation of younger people, especially in, the kind of middle ages. It's okay, but I think we kind of completely deny the beauty of old age, and yet we're all going there.
Oh, absolutely, we are, yeah. And I think, for those that are listening, especially females that, again, tend to compare and scroll on social media and, feel down about themselves if they're looking at different profiles and stuff. I think being in the industry for as long as I have, so much of that is smoke and mirrors. And I like to debunk that. I mean, again, I'm super grateful that I am strong and I have some good genetics on my side. I feel very fortunate for that, and not everybody has that. And I also want to debunk that just because someone might look like, they're super ripped and they're eating this pizza, behind the scenes, it's never the case. It rarely is, because I know a lot of the people that do that, and they struggle immensely with food issues, with, starving themselves, with major hormonal imbalances. And so, again, a lot of times it is smoke and mirrors. And so for me, it's how can I show up authentically and in a way that provides humor, but also a sense of realness, and really just kind of help people own their worth. Because I think it's also easy and this was a case for myself and maybe some other of your listeners, where it was a very trying time for me between my masculine and feminine energy, because due to some of my trauma, my background, I had to appear strong at all times. So it's like, I remember you saying like that warrior spirit. And while I have the warrior spirit, it can be a blessing and a curse, because I'll push and I'll muster through. Yet I also have to learn to have that yin and yang and that ebb and flow and that compassion. But I think getting back to the piece about the masculine, feminine energy is some women really, whether it be just emotional eating, where they might be very heavy for their size and they feel a sense of, they don't want people invading their space. So they take up a lot of space, or, and they've, endured some sort of trauma, or in my case, the trauma I endured, it was more of, okay, I got to appear physically strong at all times, because if I'm not physically strong at all times, then I'm gonna break, or people are going to invade my space, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. My story was pre-bulimia. It was binge eating. I never really, anorexia was not really ever my thing. I sometimes wished it was, as
No, you don't. No, you don't.
No. And I'm saying that to talk about the diseased mind when it comes to, isms and schisms. It's like you think, oh God, I wish I could just master not eating. But of course, that's just as sick in the other direction.
Of course, right.
And I read Portia de Rossi's book, Unbearable Lightness, about 8-9 years ago. And her thing was anorexia. And I was amazed how similar it was. I was like, oh, completely other end of the spectrum in terms of the eating disorder, with the same feelings, the same running from self, the same fear of how you're going to be treated in the world. It was fascinating. So
what was a few different common denominators you found with the similarities with the anorexia and the bulimia? Like, what do you feel like were the deep-seated belief systems?
really low self-worth, self-hatred, the belief that you're wrong, the belief that there is something wrong with you, the belief that you can't function in the world, and something about trying to survive and cover up your sensitivity or deal with your sensitivity, which is really high, and you clearly don't have tools or haven't had enough affirmation around you that it's safe to be here. So either wanting to, well, you disappear both ways. You know, with anorexia, you disappear because you're literally disappearing in front of people's eyes. But when you're very overweight too, you disappear in society's eyes because you become invalidated.
Yes,
And
yes.
I remember so many people, like I remember being looked up and down by people who would meet me first, and you see and feel the judgment that they make, you know, before I lost the 60 pounds that I lost when I was 16. But then you and I have talked about this. People go, oh, good for you, the weight's lost, or you've gained the weight. And that's really just the beginning, because that's just the physical experience. Now you have to deal with the new inner self.
You do, and you have to find that connection, because I think for anyone going through that, you feel like your body's 10 feet away from you and your soul's so far away. And it's like, okay, how can you connect the two, and what feels right and what doesn't, you know?
Yeah, and the shame, you know, the shame that got you there in the first place, and then the shame that you carry because you went there. And yeah, it's very layered. And I'm curious, you know, we've talked a lot about women. How do you find what you have stood for so far, which I know is more directed towards women, but I know many guys who are worried about how they look, or wish they were more ripped, or, you know, I think it exists for guys in a different way. I think men have had the privilege of not having to fight for their rights as much as women, so they haven't had to put all their value on how they look the way that I think women had to for such a long time. But I'm curious, how do guys connect with your story, your message? What do you hear from them?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I think they watch from the sidelines. It's very interesting, because I'll have a lot contact me over time, but I see they watch my stuff for 6 months, 8 months, a year, and then they finally feel comfortable kind of coming in and saying, "Hey, I've been watching your stuff for a while. I can really resonate. I want to get in shape, or I want to eat better." Or a lot of men will reach out to me because they identify my story with their wife. So that's always interesting too. But with men, I love it. It's fun, because you guys are just a different breed. And it's nice because while there is the emotional component, there's also a lot of practicality. And I feel like I can get to men a little bit quicker than with women, and without having to peel back so many layers. Because women, we're interesting. We're always in our heads. And I know men are that way too, but there's so many different emotional components. And I find with men, if we're able to dig a bit quicker, we can kind of get to the root of stuff a bit quicker. I feel like I can give them a little bit more tough love, and I see the results quicker with men. And I really love working with men. I think for a long time, I thought I had to narrow my scope to just women, because I thought, okay, I don't want to put too much out there because I want to niche my audience. Yet I also love working with men too. They're super fun.
Yeah. I'm curious, you do quite a bit of work around hormones and hormonal imbalance. And I know you just recently did a hormone reset challenge, which was amazing. And I know Stephen was one of your guests. Stephen, my husband, was one of your guests.
Did such a great job.
Guest teachers in there. And it looked like a phenomenal program. I don't know much about hormonal imbalance. So yeah, can you share something about that with us and how that shows up?
Absolutely. So what I also noticed too, when I had kind of overcome a lot of my eating disorder stuff, I still didn't feel right. Something felt off, and I was going to different doctors and they were saying, no, you're fine. One thing that's really prevalent is a lot of the conventional doctors do not test all the proper labs, especially for females. They only test a portion of the thyroid. So the females need a full thyroid panel, and so do men. But if you go to just a regular conventional doctor, they'll just test your TSH and your T4. But your thyroid is your T4 and T3. And a lot of times they will not do like the free T4 or the reverse T3, free T3. And so all those are really, really important to be able to figure out, okay, well, where is the thyroid gland? How is it functioning? And so a lot of times I'll hear clients say, well, I went to the doctor and they said I was fine, but I know I'm not. I'm, maybe gaining weight, or I'm feeling super tired, or I'm, really bloated and extended, or my hair is falling out, or my menstrual cycles are out of control. Something doesn't feel right. And so I have found a lot of just the regular conventional doctors, they just kind of want to keep us alive. They don't really care if we're gaining weight or feeling really tired. They just say, well, cut back your calories and exercise more. And it's not always the case. There's a lot more to it. The body is all about homeostasis. It wants a state of balance. And when that equilibrium is thrown off, sure, you can try to regulate it with nutrition and exercise and stress management and sleep, which are so important. Yet there is a huge hormonal component, especially women going into their 30s on. You have women dealing with perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, and there are 4 main components for people that really struggle with weight. It's usually estrogen dominance, low thyroid, high cortisol, or insulin resistance. And so with this society being so stressed out, we're in that constant fight or flight response, that sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous response. So when we're in this constant state of stress, the body can't adapt. And so our adrenals take a hit and our system just takes a hit. So we're in constant fight or flight. That's why a lot of us keep the weight on. That's why a lot of us have issues with, pre-diabetes, with a lot of the sugar and stuff. And a lot of women struggle with like estrogen dominance. And so there's a lot of stuff going on underneath the hood that a lot of doctors don't really care to look at. And so for me, it was important to include that in my messaging because that's really overlooked a lot of times. It's like, okay, what's underneath that hood? Yes, you're gaining weight. Yes, you're, having a lot of gut issues, but what else is going on? Once you've regulated your nutrition and your fitness, like there could easily be other things. And what I've found, 99% of my clients have a thyroid imbalance, or they have insulin issues, or they're going through perimenopause. So, and men, low testosterone, low B12, low DHEA, which are all very strong components for, men to be able to have motivation and to be able to have a good sex drive and to build muscle. So those are really important too.
So clearly, all of this work is your passion, but as we know, taking it into entrepreneurship is a whole other deal. So what indicators were there for you in your earlier life that you had, this desire or ability to be an entrepreneur?
Great question. And I would love to know yours too. I would say when I was about 7, I had this, I don't know if you remember those caboodles, but it's these caboodles that you like flip open and they're layered and you can put all these different makeup things in there. My friend and I made these friendship bracelets out of yarn. And so we went door to door saying, hey, for 25 cents, we'll create a friendship bracelet for you. So I made 25 cents for every neighbor I went to, created the friendship bracelets. But unfortunately, I couldn't make 100 of them, so I had to go back and give quarters back to everybody else. So what I did instead is I made these horrific cookies out of 3 ingredients, and I sold them at the pool, and people bought them because they felt bad, but they were absolutely disgusting. So I think I've always kind of had that drive to do my own thing and, financially support myself. But I would say that started it.
That's cool.
What about you?
Oh, there were a few, but the one that I'm most and least proud of is when I was about 13, I ran an illegal rental video business in the playground at school for 2 years. So I loved movies, or always have, and so I would buy movies on VHS. And I suddenly thought, what if I rented these out like a mobile blockbuster video,
That's awesome.
So that was like 30 years ago, and I ran it for 2 years.
Wow.
And the videos were flying across that playground, and I ran it all from a backpack, and
That is fantastic.
It's funny, it took me years to make the connection that, that's interesting, that, to see the seed of that with ending up being an entrepreneur now, which wasn't what I thought I would be. So, but the seeds are always there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What, for you, as an entrepreneur, say this past 12 months, what's been your biggest breakthrough and your biggest challenge?
Gosh, that's a great question. Biggest breakthrough, I think, getting out of my comfort zone and doing something that was challenging for me, yet I know it could be done, but it was out of my realm, out of my norm. I think getting into the hormone reset program, it was a really good success for me, and it got me out of just the fitness stuff, because I feel like at a deeper level, I knew a bit more than I was willing to share. So that was a big deal. I think by leaning into my discomfort and trying something that was a little bit out of the norm brought me to a different level. Biggest challenge, I would say, trying to work on myself the same time that I'm working on my business. Because as we know, being an entrepreneur, you have to feel pretty solid within yourself most of the time and really have a sense of clarity. Because for me, I think as an entrepreneur, I'm like, oh, there's a squirrel, there's a squirrel, there's a squirrel. I'll do all these things. And then it's like, wait a minute, let's kind of reel it back in. While those things are great, is it really going to be in your best interest? And so kind of playing around with some of that stuff has been a little challenging.
Yeah. So just talking about your breakthrough, I love that you said you knew more than you were ready to share, or you realized you knew more than you were ready to share. I think that's so common. And that's part of the entrepreneur thinking. It's like, actually, I am ready to teach this or to offer this. And I actually think it's really healthy to stretch yourself. On the one hand, it's great to teach what you know, but I some of the things I'm proudest of over the years are the things that I was really uncomfortable standing by. But it was interesting, if I hadn't have laid that kind of challenge to myself, I would never have seen that I could do it. And I think that's true for most entrepreneurs. You can do more than you think you can, and you can offer work that you think you might not quite be ready for. You'll surprise yourself.
Yes, I love that. That's so true, because I think there's that imposter syndrome where we think we're not worthy enough of doing something, or who are we to say we can do this? I think a fear of mine was, okay, well, I'm not a doctor, or I don't have a master's degree, so who am I to share this? And so I think that creeps up with a lot of people, that imposter syndrome. And then also, I feel like whatever happens, we figure it out. So one thing that I do, and I encourage some other people to do too, and we don't have to, but I'll keep myself on the hook. So let's say I'm about to launch something. I'll say that I'm launching it at a certain time out to the public, just so I don't have a way out. And so that is what I do. It keeps me accountable, and I get it done. I somehow just get it done and know that, okay, I'm on the hook for this.
Totally.
So.
Totally, that is the best thing to do. I did a 5-day entrepreneur training called Impact the World last year in San Diego, bringing it back in 2020. It's the thing I'm probably proudest of in everything I've done for the last 15 years, and it was the thing I was most terrified of. So I opened booking like 5 months before I did it.
Smart.
Knowing I could do it, but not knowing how. And then you have to work it out.
You do.
Because you're going to turn up on the first day, and if you don't have your presentations ready, the egg is on your face. So
it really is.
That pressure is great.
It's great, and it also, again, it keeps you on the hook, and it keeps you accountable, and I feel like that sometimes we feel like that we're paralyzed because we want to do things just perfectly. And to me, it's much better to take action imperfectly than to hold back and try and do it just perfectly. Otherwise, you're going to constantly paralyze yourself, and you're never going to be able to take that leap. But the more I found that when I take those imperfection steps, or those times when I put something out there that it's not just right, it doesn't matter. Like, I always figure it out. And I feel like we are often hard on ourselves, that we think, oh gosh, well, if I do this, what's going to happen? Because we want to know the outcome. Yet sometimes you won't know the outcome, but you just got to take one step at a time, put one foot in front of the other. And you always figure it out.
Yeah, totally. It's a little bit like, when you look in the mirror and you're not thrilled with what you see, and then someone meets you an hour later and they go, oh, you look really great today. It's that same dysmorphia. It's really, like, we're not necessarily going to have a perception of ourselves. The outside world is 99% of the time way more forgiving to you than you will ever be for yourself.
Yes.
So it's remembering that your inner experience of what you are doing in the world is not how everyone else is experiencing it. Like,
So
they don't know how flustered you are or worried you are. They're just taking at face value what it is you're offering. And I actually think that's one of the I think that's one of the breakthroughs as an entrepreneur, when you really get that down and you really go, oh yeah, I'm going to be uncomfortable. Oh yeah, that's part of it. I'm going to be uncomfortable regularly. And if I'm looking to grow in any way, it's just going to show up.
It is. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes is getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. And you have to get uncomfortable to grow. And yet once you continue to do it, you build that resilience. And then I think that resilience turns into even more self-confidence.
Yeah.
Well, okay, wow, I can actually do this. Okay, I've got this.
Yeah.
Rather than staying paralyzed because we think we can't.
So you mentioned your challenge, in the past year has been giving yourself self-growth outside of the business and the work. What have you done in the last year that would constitute, self-growth that you can kind of see is you working on that side of things?
I have to admit, I listened to a lot of your stuff, and I'm very inspired by you and Stephen. So I would say that for sure.
Yeah.
And then I'm part of a mastermind, which is essentially like a smaller group of entrepreneurs. And we all kind of challenge each other and call each other out on our stuff because we're able to see at a deeper level what's going on rather than just the business side. So a lot of them know me well, and they're able to kind of hold me accountable to some of that. And I've also thought about getting some sort of coach or some sort of mentor just to kind of help me out and work through some of my patterns that I notice are still there and they're still deep-seated. It doesn't matter how much growth I've done or how much I've worked on myself. There's still patterns and still things that come up that I'm aware of that I haven't fully worked through yet. So.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good amount of things right there, which I was just curious because I was like, well, have you done anything? Or is it that mind that we all have of, oh, I need to do more of this? But, the mentor thing is so vital. I mean, I think especially when you work in growth with other people, it's so vital to have that feedback loop for yourself and to, like you said, be growing off to the side.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think and you might agree with this too, is that some of my friends that aren't entrepreneurs, they don't understand. And so I can't really have a full conversation with them about my struggles, or even my husband. He doesn't understand the business. So it's hard for me to go to him with business questions. So I rely on my business mentor. And my husband's great for emotional support, and he can offer that, but say, I don't know what to tell you to do. And sometimes you just need someone just to listen and just to say, it's going to be okay, And then you also kind of need your little tribe of the people that you can go to for business advice, for emotional advice, for whatever it may be. I feel like you have to really develop that. I
so agree. And having, it's no different to, and I remember seeing this a lot when all my friends started to have kids. They need other parents. There's often this thing that happens where they don't see their single friends or their non-parenting friends as much anymore. And that's not always the case, but often it needs to be because it's, shared experience and needing to bring in people who are having kind of the same experience that they can then share and bond through. And I'm so grateful for my entrepreneur friends because exactly as you said, they are the ones they get it in the same way that we would.
They really do, and you don't feel so alone.
Totally. So I'm curious, the world is your oyster.
Okay.
What's next?
The first thing that comes to mind is traveling more, doing more public speaking opportunities, doing maybe some more retreats, in-person events. While I love doing programs and sitting behind the scenes, I've also come to realize a lot of a little bit of my depression I've gone through this year has been because I just haven't been around people as much. So my work is really behind my computer. And so I know that I need that community more. And I love being around people. I didn't realize that until I started doing my own thing. And I'm sure you can agree too. I love being an introvert, and I love that alone time. Yet I also need that community to really thrive and to get me out of my own headspace. So to answer your question, I would love to do more public speaking, more community type stuff in person, just on a larger scale. That's kind of what I see.
That's great. It took me years to work out that I would binge and purge on people.
Yeah.
So I would overdo it with people for like 3 weeks, and then I would like retreat for a week.
Sure.
And it was so imbalanced for me. And I was like, no, I love alone time, but I have to monitor it. I have to kind of dance between the two. That's kind of my healthy balance. So I so relate, and I'm sure many people will, because I think that's the tricky thing about being self-employed and so much that can be done through the computer. It's wonderful, and it can be very isolating, and you don't get that kind of energy contact that we need.
It's so true. And then I also think it's important to really feel where your energy needs to go, because we only have a certain amount of energy every day. So we have to protect that, especially in our line of work. And we give so much, yet we have to replenish. And so what does that look like? Sometimes that means that we go and lift weights to get that restorative energy, or that means taking a nap, or whatever that may be. So also having that self-awareness that we also need that energy, whether it be within ourselves to restore, or sometimes we need the energy from others to kind of thrive off that. So I do agree with that.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes up a lot for people who are working publicly or going into working publicly is, oh, I'm worried about people attacking me or judging me, or I don't know if I want that level of exposure. How have you dealt with that? Because you're about 4 years into to being out there on the internet, and how have you dealt with that? And did you have any fears about that at the beginning?
Absolutely. I definitely did. And I think it goes back to the imposter syndrome of, okay, are people going to find out? Or, I mean, like, what are they going to find out, right? I think we're harder on ourselves. Have I had troll experiences? For sure. And you know what? Now I see it as, okay, well, I'm getting my message out there even more. And that just means I'm just putting myself out there more. So if people, I used to get really offended, and I used to get my feelings hurt really bad. And I would like lash out really quick because I was so full of emotion and anger. And now I take a minute and I sit back and I decide either A, if I'm going to respond at all, I might just avoid it, or B, I might just say, gosh, I'm really sorry you're feeling that way. Or I might say something along those lines where, because to me now I see it as they must be really sad or really unhappy if they have to sit there and troll other people's stuff and make derogatory comments. Yeah. So, and then sometimes I'll just block them. So I do that too.
Totally.
So, yeah, but I say if you know your students or the entrepreneurs, they get trolls in the beginning, amazing. That just means you're sticking people and getting people uncomfortable. So
I mean, it's true. It's like, you know, if you think back to your playground days, even the popular kid had a few people kind of like going, yeah, I don't like him. The difference with the internet is some people will be vocal about it. So I always say to people who are really scared about that, I say, think of your favorite author, singer, songwriter, public figure, actor, go to Amazon, look up one of their products, one of their things, and hit their 1-star reviews. And especially if it's someone you love, you're a little bit shocked to see like these 1-star takedowns, because it's not the 1 star, it's what a lot of those 1-star reviewers will say. Some might be giving a legitimately 1-star review for a reason, but the level of attack and judgment and vengeance that people take in reviews that they're not really aware of or is just unchecked. I think when you see some of your most loved people, or people that you know aren't really very controversial. You know, I remember with Eckhart Tolle, I thought, I think just before I self-released a book like 6-7 years ago, it helped me to see people attacking Eckhart Tolle, who, if you don't know him, is a very famous spiritual teacher. And to me, he's harmless. Like there's, you know, he's one of the most harmless, sweet people out there, really.
Right.
And people were playing takedown with him. So once you start to depersonalize it and just see that it's par for the course, it helps you go, okay, I'm going to weather a few, and I might learn something about my wounds on the way, because the ones that really get under your skin or trigger you, it's really interesting. You're like, oh, wow, that really got to me. What part of me agrees with them, or what part of me has experienced that before, and this is a moment to let it go.
100%. And then I think also it's easy to narrow in on that one negative comment when you have hundreds of other positive ones. And you got to let it go.
Yeah. And that's also, I think, a self-management thing. When you work publicly, there are days that you should not be on social media because you're just too sensitive, or things have gone badly that morning with something. You know, it's like you have to you have to know when you're an athlete and when you're not an athlete, when you're resting and when you're performing in terms of your muscle, I think, in that way.
100%. And one thing I would like to piggyback off of that is when I find myself in a very vulnerable place, especially if I find that I'm getting triggered super easily with business stuff or other people, I check it. I say, okay, have I gotten enough rest? Okay, have I avoided alcohol? Have I, done something for myself to take care of myself, like with exercise or something? Am I eating properly? And am I regulating my stress in some form or fashion? And a lot of times, if I'm feeling very vulnerable, I haven't slept well and my food kind of hasn't been that great and I haven't exercised in a couple of days. It's like, oh, okay, there you are.
Totally.
Totally.
So I'm interested in just kind of finishing with you, how have you specifically used Instagram? Because I really enjoy your Instagram platform. So I'm curious how you have found, what does Instagram do for you and what do you enjoy about it?
Sure. And if any of your listeners have questions, I'll be happy. You can give them my personal email, and I'll be happy to help anyone that I can. I would say for Instagram, it's been a work in progress. There's, with all the algorithm stuff, you got to kind of play around with that. But I really just try for Instagram to be 100% transparent. I'll do stories and I'm really inappropriate. Like I'll do really ridiculous things, but people love humor. And one thing that I told myself and I told my husband as well, I said, and especially with Instagram, I think now, because that's a little bit bigger platform, Facebook is still prevalent and so is YouTube, but I found that a lot of people use Instagram, is that I told myself about a year ago, I said, I'm not going to try and be super like tidy and perfect or, fit in this box on social media. I want to be exactly who I am behind the scenes that I am in front. And so that's me being goofy. That's me being silly and all these different things. So I encourage people just to bring their personality to the forefront and talk as though you're talking to someone, not, hi, my name is Kim and I've got talk is like, hey, what's going on? People like that. They want to feel engaged. They want to know about your life, but they really enjoy the authentic side. They don't care about some anterior pelvic tilt or that your pelvis, this, or this. They just want to know, hey, how can I feel better in my jeans or something, So that's been a big one. And I really just take a lot of time. I spend at least for all my posts about an hour or so to work on it.
It shows because I feel there's a crackle on your Instagram page. That's,
Thanks,
I don't spend much time on social media, but I really enjoy looking at your page and the authenticity is what comes through.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So what are your next projects?
Next projects, definitely I'm going to do the Hormone Reset program again. I would love to be able to make that even a larger platform. Thoroughly enjoyed that. That was my favorite. Next projects, some travels and stuff, some public speaking gigs that I had said earlier. And really just spending some quality time with my husband too and my animals. And I'm kind of just open. I'm going to allow things to see what unfolds for me and just try some different stuff. But yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming and having this.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
And I know that many people listening and watching are going to get so much out of it. So thank you for doing what you do in the world.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Impact the World. And if you want to go deeper and more in depth with my work, you should check out my members group, The Portal. You can find it at my website, leeharrisenergy.com, or visit theportal.world.